to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it.
That was a look at last night's debate between U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, and a debate in which many are saying, and the polls suggest, that Donald Trump won handily. This is leaving the Democratic Party in a little bit of chaos right now. Let's bring in Lew Lukens, who's senior partner at Signum Global Advisors. Their job is to take the politics and find out what it means for the portfolio. And Lew, I know that Signum has deep contacts, both, on the left and on the right, but on the left, this narrative is emerging that there is a lot of anxiety and concern about Joe Biden as the candidate. What can you tell us?
Well, I'm here to tell you today that Joe Biden, as far as we believe, is not going to be replaced on the ticket. And you're right, there's a lot of concern. Joe Biden's main job last night was to reassure voters that he has the mental and physical acuity and ability to remain as president. And I don't think he put fears about his age to rest last night. Clearly, he had a very off night. But he's speaking right now as we speak at a rally in North Carolina. He is energized. His campaign, he and his campaign are determined to persuade Democratic leadership and voters and swing voters that he remains the man for the job. And we'll see a big effort for that in the coming months ahead.
How significantly are current polls likely to alter that plan? Because based on polling, Donald Trump seems like he will win as president.
So really the polling to look at is the polling in the 6 swing states that are going to decide this election. And Donald Trump is either tied with Biden or slightly ahead in all 6 of those states. So we will be watching that very, very closely in the next, say, 1 to 2 weeks as the effects of this debate kind of sink in with voters in those states. But let me just say, it is very difficult to replace Joe Biden on the ticket. The easiest way, and I use that word easily, loosely, is for him to voluntarily step aside. That would open the door to an open convention where the party could pick somebody else. But there is no indication that Joe Biden is prepared to or willing or at all interested in stepping aside in this contest. He believes he is the only Democrat who has beaten and who can beat Donald Trump again. He is sticking in this race. He is stubborn about this, and there's no sign that he's going to give up. The other alternative is for over half of his 4,000 delegates to turn against him at the Democratic National Convention and throw it into a contested convention. Again, we see very little likelihood. These delegates who are pledged to Joe Biden are very, very loyal to him. So the scenario which is being talked about that somehow he ends up not on the ticket, we just think is not going to happen. He is going to be, as far as we can tell at this point, the Democratic candidate for president.
Okay, so then, again, I take it back. We don't talk politics. We talk about what it means for the portfolio. The markets seem to be taking, there's a lot of chatter about it, certainly in the economist notes and the strategist notes that I'm reading today, but it doesn't seem market moving.
Well, I don't think it's market moving. Look, last night's debate raised a lot of concerns about Joe Biden's age. Those concerns, I think, were already baked into the equation, right? People since last year and before have been expressing worry about Joe Biden's age. So on the one hand, there was nothing really shocking about last night. It just reinforced what a lot of people already felt. And I think it certainly within the Democratic Party, there's going to be a real effort in the coming weeks to say, look, Joe Biden didn't have a great night. But look at the alternative. Donald Trump sat up there for 90 minutes and basically said lie after lie after lie after lie. So I think that'll help refocus Democratic voters. And this election is going to come down to turnout and to voter enthusiasm. Voters aren't particularly enthusiastic about either of the two candidates. But I think at the end of the day, we think that key issues on the Democratic side, like women's reproductive freedom, climate change, democracy, and sort of saving America's democratic institutions, will end up convincing enough voters, if they're not voting for Joe Biden, at least to vote against Donald Trump.
Do investors have a horse in this race? And I ask that, is there a preferred candidate for somebody who's long U.S. equities?
Well, look, our base case is that Joe Biden will win this election and that there'll be split control of Congress, which is actually a fairly good scenario for, I think, for investors. It provides some level of stability in Washington. If the Democrats gain complete control or the Republicans gain complete control of Washington, then I think you could see some pretty radical divergence on policy issues, including around taxation and regulation. So those are important things to watch. And of course, we do watch those. But our base case of split control of Congress with Biden in the White House, I think, is actually a fairly
It's still
stable.
Biden, even after the debate. You still think it's still Biden in the White House?
Yes, we're not changing. I know a lot of firms are changing their base cases quickly this morning. We're sticking with ours, and we think there's still a lot of, there are a lot of things coming up in the coming months, including Donald Trump's conviction, the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention, a second debate in September, Trump's VP pick. There are a lot of things to watch that could still affect this race that we will be watching, but we're not changing our base case yet.